there's nothing on TV.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, try MSNBC.
Molly, don't you know that's a liberal channel?
Yeah, but they might have a special on Woodrow Wilson.
To accept the decision the grand jury came to in Ferguson, he also urged...
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a more special broadcast on the life and times of Woodrow Wilson. Good evening, and welcome to this special edition of The Life and Times of Woodrow Wilson. I'm your host, George Custer Davis III, as we take this time to explore such a great president. Wilson served 2 terms as president, from 1913 to 1921. He also is known for introducing liberals into the country, and he is also known for his Federal Reserve, leading us into World War I, and his peace efforts. Woodrow Wilson was born December 28, 1856, in Stoughton, Virginia. The Wilson family had strong ties to the South. Not long after Woodrow was born, they moved to Augusta, Georgia, where he grew up. When he was only 5 years old, the South seceded from the Union, causing the Civil War to break out. He said that his earliest memories of childhood were of the Civil War. Seeing the soldiers march through town, watching his mother tend to wounded Confederate soldiers in a local hospital, and witnessing Robert E. Lee pass through town under Union Guard on his way to surrender. Woodrow Wilson ended up going to the University of Virginia to get his law degree, and then he went to Johns Hopkins University to study political science and history. He ended up getting a PhD, becoming the first ever president to get a PhD. In April of 1883, he went to Rome, Georgia to visit his relatives. Little did he know, he would end up finding the love of his life. When he was there, he met and fell in love with Ellen Axon. They had much in common, but mostly the fact that they were both strong Presbyterians. They were married 2 years later in 1885 and had 3 children together, all girls, Jessie, Margaret, and Eleanor. Dr. Wilson went on to become a professor for 17 years, first at Wesleyan University and then the University of Princeton. In 1902, Woodrow Wilson became the president of Princeton. He was known for making revolutionary changes, which at times was met with constant opposition. In 1910, after 8 years as president of Princeton, Woodrow Wilson was approached by the head honchos of New Jersey's Democratic Party. These party bosses were pretty sketchy. They needed someone to run for governor, and they wanted someone who would be easy for them to control. I'm sure it probably went a little something like this.
Who do you think we can run for governor in 1910?
What about that guy, Woodrow Wilson, who's the president of Princeton?
Yeah, he'll be great. He'll be also really easily controlled, too.
Yeah, that'd be swell for us Democrats.
Buddy, come over here.
You want?
We heard he was a mighty good president at Princeton. So we was knowing if you was want to run for governor. We might throw in an opportunity that you might become president.
It's a deal, guys.
Woodrow Wilson is doing very good with his campaign for governor.
Yeah.
Ain't this swell? After he becomes governor, we can control him from behind the scenes.
Paper!
What is this? Governor Frontrunner Woodrow
my
Wilson
Goodness!
ditches party buses and runs on his own.
Oh my! What?
Woodrow Wilson ended up finding out about their plan to control him, so he ditched them and started his campaign by himself. Woodrow Wilson ended up winning the race as governor. Oh, thank you, Barbara. He ended up becoming pretty famous as governor. He passed many pieces of legislation, such as the Workers' Compensation Program and a Public Utility Commission. After just 2 years as governor, Woodrow Wilson ran for president. Woodrow Wilson ran as a Democratic nominee in the 1912 campaign. and his campaign slogan was basically, New Freedom. Woodrow Wilson's two biggest opponents in the presidential campaign were William Howard Taft and Teddy Roosevelt. These two presidents ended up getting up in a huge fight, which meant Woodrow Wilson won in a landslide. In his first term as president, Woodrow Wilson faced many obstacles, such as World War I, which was just heating up, and a revolution in nearby Mexico. There were also many civil rights issues and women's rights issues. He also ended up reducing the tariff taxes, which were taxes on importing and exporting goods, and instead he implemented income tax. He also passed the Federal Reserve Act, which was a huge reform. He had a famous quote about it, saying, "The banking system must be public, not private, and must be vested in the government itself." Wilson was serious about leveling the playing field for businesses, and he passed many antitrust laws to do so. He was also a serious campaigner to stay out of World War I during his first term. On August 6th, 1914, tragedy struck the White House. Wife Ellen died of kidney disease, but only 9 months later, he remarried to Edith Galt. This caused a national outcry. How could a president marry only 9 months after his wife died? I can only imagine what the Gossip magazine said.
I wonder what is in this magazine.
Oh my goodness, Caitlin, did you hear about Woodrow Wilson's new wife?
I know, it's crazy.
It's only been 9 months since his wife died.
I heard she was abducted by aliens.
This magazine says his first wife died from depression because her high school boyfriend Babe Ruth got married and she secretly loved him.
Babe Ruth. I still think it's aliens.
Woodrow Wilson campaigned for his second term, and he won the presidency in 1917. Now, World War I was really starting to heat up. Wilson tried his best to stay out of the war, but the double-crossing Germans made it really hard. Germany tried to enlist Mexico to attack the United States. This caused a huge national outcry. Even after this, Woodrow Wilson still wanted to make peace with Germany, but the Germans, they wanted no peace, and in turn, sank several U.S. ships. After this, Teddy Roosevelt, who was not a fan of Woodrow Wilson, famously said, "If he does not go to war, I shall skin him alive." Woodrow had no choice. On April 6, 1917, he declared war on Germany. Sending troops to Europe really helped England and France's fight, and by 1918, 1 million American troops had reached England. On the home front, Americans were helping the war effort too, by rationing food, fuel, and working in factories to make weapons. There were also some new guests at the White House. Woodrow kept a flock of sheep on the White House lawn. The sheep were an example of how important home front contributions were to the war effort. The flock was led by a ram named Old Ike, who was famous for chewing tobacco. Literally. He would munch on any cigarette butt he could find. In 1919, the Great War was finally over. After this, Woodrow Wilson gave a famous speech called the 14 Points, which were 14 points he said were needed for world peace. These included actions that needed to be taken against violent countries, equal trading, and equal sailing in the seas. Also, he had the last point, the 14th point, which was a League of Nations. League of Nations was a league that Wilson wanted to set up, which consisted of leaders of different nations to talk out their differences instead of having war. He then traveled to Paris, France, for the Paris Peace Conference. The Paris Peace Conference was a conference of the world's leaders to negotiate a peace treaty after World War I. Going to the peace conference, he became the first ever president to cross the Atlantic Ocean while in office. His greatest accomplishment was his efforts in trying to make world peace. And for his efforts, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1919. The rest of his term after the war consisted of bringing the troops back home. But on September 25th, 1919, everything changed. On a public speaking tour, he suffered a serious stroke. And just a few days later, he suffered another huge stroke. After this, he never fully recovered. He only had partial vision in his right eye, and he couldn't even move his left side. After his presidential term came to an end, he retired to an elegant townhome in Washington, D.C. He hardly ever appeared in public, except for his occasional visits to the theater. He also became the president of the American Historical Association. But he did often fantasize about running for a third term in 1924. And in February of 1924, Woodrow Wilson died of another serious stroke. And that concludes our special on the life and times of Woodrow Wilson. You heard it right here on MSNBC, your place for the most liberal news. And join us next time for our next special, Obama, the best thing that happened to America. Wasn't that special on Woodrow Wilson great?
Yeah, he was a great president.
Huh. Why do you say that?
Well, he was really peace-loving, and he loved a lot of people. And this special quality was used for that Treaty of Versailles, you know? And those 14 points that he had, well, they influenced a lot of people for the push towards world peace. And he also strengthened those laws about limiting child labor and the power and to cut, the power of monopolies.
Yeah, but at the same time, he was also, overly cautious, it seemed like. I mean, he was really reluctant to enter World War I, and lots of other things. He also implemented his progressive agenda, which ended up being pretty bad for the country. He also implemented the Federal Reserve Act. I mean, that's caused so many recessions in America, including the Great Depression.
Well, I guess he could be both a good and a bad president.
Yeah, I think Americans should respect him too. Even though he kind of was reluctant to enter World War I, he helped lead us through it. And those leadership abilities helped start the movement for world peace.